agricultural sector, also known as an industry that produces livestock, crops, fish, and poultry, which is also one of the most important sector in the food security in every region and nation. As agriculture is a natural sources of input and food, this sector affected by the changes of environment or climatic factors such as light, water, temperature, and air. Thus, this sector needs a consistent care for better outcome. However, the COVID-19 pandemic has caused a lot of damage to the sector, especially in Thailand, one of the most famous agricultural products producer in the world. Move on to the first implications of COVID-19 to the agricultural production in Thailand, which is the decrease of mental health among farmers. A study has been conducted in order to determine the impact of COVID-19 on daily lives and mental health of farmers in northern Thailand. This study was carried by interview on September and October 2021. The respondents are 2,046 farmers. 61.2% of farmers stated that their daily lives has been in a worse direction because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Not to mention, the decrease of agricultural products price has lessened the profit of farmers. Meanwhile, half of the farmers agreed that they suffered moderate stress due to the pandemic. Yet, 27.6% of farmers stated that they face a high stress and 2.5% face extremely high stress. The causes of the stress that getting the higher vote by the farmers are loss of household income, increase of COVID-19 cases, and increase of death due to the pandemic. In addition, 12.4% of the farmers suffered from mild symptoms and 3.7% suffered from severe symptoms of depression.
The second implication is the fall of export. Thailand agriculture is among the major contributors that specialize on export agri-food supply to other countries. The majority of population in Thailand has earning to continue their living through agriculture. Hence, the decline of agricultural export due to the pandemic has increased the financial crisis of Thailand. During the first phase of pandemic in 2022, the implication of pandemic has caused a disruption of the supply chain, especially in rubber industry. The volume of world demand for natural rubber export has fell due to the lockdown and restriction on operation. Then, the production of the Thai rice to be exported has declined due to high production costs. The restriction of lockdown on closing down temporarily operation increased world demand for Thailand rice. On the first quarter of outbreak, COVID-19 pandemic has boosted a world demand on market power in which Thailand export on sugar has declined from 2% in 2019 to 19% in 2022. The spike of outbreak causing a production of agriculture to significantly fall, then slowly reducing a demand of export, but on the same time has caused a panic buying and losing supply chain. On the other part, the implication of COVID-19 pandemic on agriculture sector will result in higher cost of trade because of disruption on transportation and logistics system that affected due to the restriction.
The third implication is disruptions in fishing production. The COVID-19 pandemic has severely impacted on the region's fish production, both marine capture and aquaculture. In Thailand, work disruptions affected many migrant fish workers who also had poor access to public health facilities. COVID-19 restrictions prevented fish farmers from harvesting their fish, and therefore they cannot start a new production cycle, causing a significant decrease in fish supply during the first half of 2020. And as expected, fish prices fell by more than 50% for some products during the first weeks of April 2020, in line with reduced demand, despite fish being the most consumed animal source food in Thailand. So the fishery industry depends heavily on migrant workers from the neighboring countries. And during the first months of the pandemic, fast border closures in March 2020 triggered a rapid exodus of migrant workers, and it was reported between 60,000 and 200,000 migrant workers from Myanmar, the Lao People's Democratic Republic, and Cambodia left Thailand that month when the border closure were announced for the following weeks. And as fishing resumed, there were a severe shortage of labor in some ports since many migrant fish workers left when Thailand borders closed.
The fourth implication is decline in marketing of crustacean. Thailand is the world's third largest exporter of crustacean products, mainly to China, USA, and Japan. However, in the past few years, Thailand has experienced a reduction in fresh chilled crustacean export because of declines in catching, rising labor costs, and unearly mortality syndrome in shrimp. Except with Taiwan, there was a decline in export volume growth with all major export partners in 2020. In their research paper stated that the export volume of fresh, chilled, and frozen crustacean declined by 19% in 2020 compared to 2018, driven mainly by these factors. Still, the COVID-19 pandemic caused additional damage to the fishery sector due to the large number of COVID-19 cases found in one of the key fish markets in Thailand. Laos banned import of crustacean products from Thailand due to a fear of contaminations, and export slowed to major markets such as China and Hong Kong. In contrast, export volume of processed crustaceans declined only modestly by 6%, even though the recovery of fresh, chilled, and frozen crustaceans has been slowed. Processed crustaceans showed some recovery following the peak of COVID-19 and posted positive growth by the end of the year.
Last but not least, the final implication is how pandemic revealed weakness in Thailand's food production. Inefficiency in administrative exposed that Thailand's government was unprepared for the worst crisis. Thai government budget recorded deficit since 2009 until the worst in 2022, which is a deficit negative 6.1% of GDP. This financial problem adversely affects food production from every stage during the pandemic. Thus, the government is only able to cover 23% of the fuel subsidy to agriculture production. As a result, food inflation in May 2022 increased to 6.18%, causing the unemployed and poor residents find it difficult to get food supplies, eventually left them starving. There are two recommendations that could be implemented to recover the agriculture production after the damages. The first recommendation is keep the international market open. Thailand is a big exporter for several agriculture products such as rice, cotton, and soybean. Thailand is also the biggest exporter for natural rubber in the world and has 33.3% share of global rubber export market. Thus, in order to recover Thailand's agriculture sector production, the authorities should keep international market in agriculture and food product open, transparent, and predictable, as well as avoid any trade restrictions so that it will not be a barrier for the sector to improve its production and recover their loss. Next, provide special assistance for the farmers and agriculture laborers, as the farmers in the Thailand face stress and even depression due to their loss in agriculture sector, as well as release the burdens of expenses. Proper financial aids should be prepared by the government to ease their financial burden.
Could be concluded how COVID-19 pandemic has badly affected to the agriculture production in Thailand. The damage has caused a big loss to one of the most active agriculture exporter, as explained just now in the implication part. The recommendation stated just now could be applied by Thailand in order to recover the agriculture production.